Welcome to This Explainer. Look, if you're turning in right now, chances are you're exhausted, profoundly confused, and let's be honest, probably running entirely on coffee and patience. Parenting is hard enough, but parenting a teenager? Wow, that can feel like living with a miniature, highly unpredictable roommate from another dimension. Well, today, we're going to decode those sudden, unpredictable behavioral shifts that are driving you absolutely crazy. And we aren't going to rely on old wives' tales here. We're looking strictly at the science of what is actually happening inside your child. Okay, let's dive right into this. Here's our roadmap. We're covering the adolescent transformation, what's happening inside the teenage brain, the mix of biology, sleep, and stress, common mistakes parents make, and finally, the science of connection.
Ask literally any parent of a teenager, and this is the exact question that haunts them. What happened to my child? It is a totally valid, almost universal feeling. Honestly, it often feels like some bizarre alien abduction scenario. You have this sweet, agreeable kid, and then seemingly overnight, someone else entirely takes their place. I want to assure you, you are not crazy for feeling this way, and more importantly, you are not alone.
It's a wild shift, right? I mean, yesterday, your child was so eager to spend time with you, wanting to share every single detail of their day. Today, boom, they're locking their bedroom doors, becoming secretive, deeply moody, challenging your opinions, and acting unusually sensitive to pretty much everything you say. It's incredibly jarring. But science actually has a highly reassuring answer for this exact juxtaposition.
Let's start with part 1, the adolescent transformation, a period of extraordinary growth. The very first step in regaining our sanity as parents is reframing how we view this difficult phase. Because here's the truth. Your teenager isn't broken. They aren't just being intentionally difficult, and this isn't necessarily a rebellion against you. Adolescence is literally a second window of development. Just like that explosive growth they went through as little infants, teenagers from roughly ages 10 to 13 all the way into their early 20s are undergoing massive remodeling. Their brain, their body, their entire identity, it's all changing. Think of your teenager as an active, incredibly overwhelming construction site. Which brings us nicely to part 2, inside the teenage brain, currently under construction.
This is where it gets absolutely fascinating. So much of their unpredictable, chaotic behavior is driven strictly by neurological changes. We so often make the mistake of assuming teenagers think exactly like adults do. They physically do not. Brain imaging studies show us that the prefrontal cortex, which is the specific area of the brain responsible for planning, sound judgment, impulse control, and logical decision-making, is actually among the very last regions to mature. It continues developing well into the mid to late 20s. They literally do not have the same decision-making hardware fully installed yet.
And notice the wild neurological mismatch happening here. While that logical prefrontal cortex is still developing, the emotional center of the brain, the amygdala, is already highly active. This perfectly explains why teens feel emotions so intensely, why they react so rapidly, and why they struggle so much with impulse control and risk-taking. They are seeking novelty and excitement with an overly active emotional engine, but completely underdeveloped brakes. And remember, this doesn't mean they lack intelligence. They are highly intelligent. Their systems are just temporarily, totally out of sync.
Let's look at how this plays out in the real world in part 3. Biology, sleep, and stress. The perfect storm.
As if the internal brain construction wasn't enough, compounding physical and social changes create a perfect storm for emotional volatility. You add in massive fluctuations in hormones like estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone, mix that with academic stress and social media comparisons, and you get an evolving brain under immense pressure. Which leads to a massive pain point for parents, and a question I hear all the time: why do they pull away from me? When a teenager suddenly distances themselves, our instinct is to instantly interpret it as rejection, and frankly, it feels like painful rejection. But science asks us to look at it differently.
Research actually shows that this distancing is a completely normal, healthy, and absolutely necessary developmental milestone. It's called identity formation. They are actively trying to answer fundamental life-shaping questions. Who am I? What do I believe? Where do I really fit in? To figure all that out, they naturally have to step away from you, spend way more time with peers, and seek out autonomy. They aren't losing attachment to you. They're just growing up.
And here's another incredibly frustrating question that causes endless weekend arguments in households everywhere. Why do they sleep so late? Man, it is so easy to look at a teenager sleeping until noon and just label them as lazy, apathetic, or completely irresponsible. But science tells an entirely different story. It turns out their sleep schedule is actually dictated by biology. During adolescence, biological sleep rhythms naturally shift.
Their bodies are physically wired to become sleepy much later at night. In fact, a teenager's brain releases melatonin up to 2 hours later than an adult's brain. This biological reality is what causes a direct head-on conflict with early school schedules. And the kicker? Sleep deprivation makes everything else, the mood swings, the anxiety, the poor concentration, and the risk-taking, significantly worse. Moving right along to Part 4, mistakes parents often make, or how we accidentally add stress to the construction zone.
So, knowing all this brain science, how do we usually react? Well, usually not well. Our natural, reactive parenting instincts to protect and guide our kids can sometimes completely backfire and add massive amounts of stress to their already chaotic internal construction zone. If you wanted a step-by-step guide on how to absolutely ruin communication with your teen, you'd just do this. First, try to control everything. Look, excessive control just breeds secrecy, not obedience. Second, constantly criticize them. Teens are highly sensitive to judgment, and criticism simply destroys their self-esteem. Third, minimize their feelings by saying things like, "It's not a big deal, you'll get over it." That practically guarantees they'll feel misunderstood. And finally, compare them with others to create instant resentment and shame. Obviously, we want to do the exact opposite of this entire list.
Which brings us to our final section, Part 5, the science of connection, moving from controlling to coaching.
Let's look at what actually works. We really need to transition our mindset here. The goal of parenting a teenager is no longer to manage every single decision they make, but rather to be the safe harbor they can return to while they learn to navigate the waters themselves. We have to move away from being the commander, using authoritarian, fear-based control, interrogating them and trying to instantly solve their problems. Instead, studies show we absolutely must become the coach. This means being authoritative. It means bringing high warmth, setting very clear boundaries, but actually explaining the why behind them, and replacing our judgment with curiosity. Instead of lecturing, try just asking, "Hey, what do you think would help here?" When they feel heard, they instantly become so much more receptive to your guidance.
The research is crystal clear on this. The single strongest protective factor for adolescent mental health is a strong parent-child relationship. Simple, daily connection practices matter immensely. Shared meals, daily conversations where you just actively listen without fixing anything, and monitoring their activities without resorting to surveillance and spying. Remember, curiosity builds trust. Interrogation destroys it entirely.
Now, I do need to pause and say this. While we want to be deeply understanding of the teenage brain, we must also be vigilant. There are warning signs parents should never ignore: persistent sadness, any self-harm, significant social withdrawal, extreme anger, substance use, or a sudden sharp academic decline. Because their brain is under such heavy construction right now, many mental health conditions first emerge during this exact phase. If you see these specific signs, early intervention and professional help are absolutely crucial.
I want to conclude this explainer with a really profound shift in perspective. Your teenager is not giving you a hard time. They are having a hard time. Behind every single eye roll, slam door, and moody sigh is a brain trying desperately to navigate one of life's most intense, complex transitions. Adolescence is temporary. It will eventually end. But the empathy, respect, and connection you build during this chaotic time, that lasts a lifetime. So I leave you with this. What kind of relationship are you building for when the construction is finally finished?